Everywhere you look nowadays, there seems to be more and more violence popping up on televisions, on computers, and a lot of it is actually aimed at children. With me, I have a guest who wrote a book, Taking Back Childhood, Nancy Carlson Page. Thank you for being here.
It's good to be here.
Now, I read your book from cover to cover.
Wow.
And I found myself, I really did, and I found myself nodding as I was going along. I actually agree with almost everything you've said in here. As you point out, there was a deregulation at one point, wasn't there, in how the media could advertise to children?
Yes. There used to be, actually, there's a long history of protecting children from over-commercialized television. Once the Federal Communications Commission started in 1933, it was really there to protect the public interest. So there were always.
So what happened?
I know.
Yeah.
Well, what happened is Ronald Reagan came to office in the mid-1980s, and there was a strong shift in believing that the marketplace could control the marketplace and regulation should be removed. And so they deregulated. They took away all the regulations that had been put in place
Was it all
to protect.
money, do you think, Nancy?
Oh yeah, it's a belief system that you should be able to make maximum profits and the marketplace will take care of itself. I don't agree with that.
Capitalism at its best.
That's right.
All right.
But you know, when it comes to children,
Right.
I strongly believe they need protection, and that it's our social responsibility, really, as adults, to protect kids from seeing all kinds of things they shouldn't see.
Do you also, in a way, blame Hollywood for the ratings? Like, for instance, what used to be a PG-13, or
yes.
what is a PG-13 now, used to be R-rated.
Yeah, and that's
It's trickled down,
absolutely.
hasn't it? Absolutely. Even to the PG films that you see, they have violence in them that really should not be shown to children at that age.
Yes.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. And the problem there is that the rating system is flawed in the first place, because the people who give the ratings, well, no one knows who they are. They're handpicked by the industry itself.
Really?
And they call it self-regulation, but you know, their motivation is really to give the most
money.
lenient rating. Everything is boiling down to money in
Right.
our conversation. But the idea is to give the most lenient rating possible, and therefore films are rated, I think, inappropriately in the first place, but also we've seen a ratings creep. So research shows that there's as much violence in a PG-13 rated film today as there was in an R-rated one a decade
Right.
ago.
Right. And younger children are being exposed to, well, not just violence, but they're being exposed to more violent, even toys, games. You know, I heard of third graders, and in fact you've written about it in here, that were exposed to a game where the whole aim of the game was to shoot people and then set them on fire with gasoline.
Yeah.
And we're talking third graders.
We're talking third graders.
Yeah.
So there's two parts to the problem you've identified right there. One is, another part of the greed we're talking about is that companies that want to sell products, market products to children, market toys and then toothbrushes, underpants, lunch boxes with the logos from films that are rated PG-13 to children 3 and 4 years old and up. And I think it should be illegal to market toys and products linked to films for older kids to younger children, because it gives them the idea the movie's for them, and they
Right.
start begging their parents to take them. And I think it's appropriate to have a regulation to protect children across the board from that kind of marketing.
Now, I will go to actually ask you how and what we can do to change this. But don't you think that the parents should take more of a role in what their children are watching? Half the time they have no clue what they're actually watching on television. If they sat down and watched even some kids' programs, they'd see the amount of violence that was actually creeping into everyday life.
You know, in my perfect world, I would say, yes, I agree with that, but I interviewed many parents for this book, and I heard over and over again the stresses they feel from the ramped up life they're living. Parents are working longer and harder now than they did a generation ago. They work an average of 167 more hours a year, which is the equivalent of a month more than I did when
They should
I
go
was...
to Europe. No one works over there.
No one works.
They have a siesta in the day. They have weeks and months off. I know.
And
perhaps we should adopt a more European approach to
well,
this.
I'm all for it, and let's go with European healthcare too. While we're on the
Whoa,
subject,
let's not go there. We're talking about violence in
but
the
we are
media.
talking about protecting children, and we have 10 million kids without health care coverage too.
Now I have to bring this up because you actually have a son that's in some of these movies.
Yes.
And your son is?
My son is Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. And what I found really interesting in your book, was when they were children, something really bad happened to one of the family friends.
Yes.
Both your sons, Kyle and Matt, had a friend who was in fact murdered on the streets of Boston.
Cambridge, yes.
Cambridge,
yes.
For his jacket.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of, were you always an advocate for children in this way, or was that really got you into it, or how did that affect you and the kids?
And it's hard to say superficially how the murder of a close friend affects you.
Absolutely.
But certainly, I've always been a child advocate, and I've always been interested in children's conflicts, the impact of violence in society, and how it affects children.
Because you actually have a doctorate. You have a PhD, don't you?
Yes, and it's in this area of conflict resolution in children. But after Jesse was murdered, it gave a kind of personal meaning to the work that has always been there since. And I think my sons also feel similarly that the work is important in a way. It might have been more intellectual before, but it's become more of a heartfelt cause.
And it actually made me. It made the book. The book meant more to me after that.
Knowing that.
Yeah, knowing that you had this personal tragedy. That happened. You know, it's all very well for people to have PhDs, and for me, to talk to parents about how easy it is to do, different things with children. But to actually, and I think one of the reasons that I'm probably good at it is because I don't come from a particularly great background, so I've actually learned a lot from it and learned how not to do things. And as I say, this to me was a really interesting beginning to the book.
I thought long and hard about whether or not to start that way, and it seemed like the right thing to do. That whole prologue.
Well, it grabs you. I mean,
yes.
It grabs you, and again, you're talking about real life here. We're not just talking about interviewing several parents and
doing studies.
Right.
No.
This is real life, and this is what happens.
And actually, the whole reason I wrote that book was hoping to affect the real lives of real kids in positive ways, and helping kids actually, and parents, learn how to be in relationship in more nonviolent ways and non-aggressive ways.
Because obviously the younger you get them, the better they are when they get older. I mean, you really, take a child from 0 to 7, and that's really the ages that you're going to shape what they become as a man. There was a program in England that said, show me the child at 7 and I'll show you the man. And it's kind of true, isn't it? So if we get kids at an earlier age and we start, teaching them cause and consequence, because a lot of children are watching this on television and not really realising it's real life, and this is what can happen in real life. That's kind of going back to what we were saying before about Jesse. This is not a game. You really can really hurt people.
Well,